Hi folks, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about video lecture number 2 on the unit 10, that is participatory online media. Now video lecture number 2 would focus upon participatory culture and new media literacies framework, that is from a sociological approach. Now we've talked about the typology of producers in the last lecture. So we know that young people play the role of consumers as well as producers in online media spaces. Therefore, there is an explosion of new media technologies that make it possible for average consumers to archive, annotate, appropriate and recirculate media content in powerful new ways. Youth participate in online media spaces for two primary purposes according to Ito et al. In a book published in 2009. First is friendship driven and the second is interest driven. Ito et al. Have also identified three subgenres of participation. First is hanging out, which is essentially friendship driven participation. Second is messing around, which is acquiring a new skill online. And third is geeking out, wherein intensive and focused participation is undertaken after acquiring the skill online. Hence, it leans towards learning via online spaces. Now, what exactly is participatory culture? Participatory culture is a culture with relatively low barriers to participate. It also has the ability to artistically express and civic engagement. The third element of participatory culture is strong support for creating and sharing one's creations. Participatory culture also enables some type of informal mentorship, especially peer-to-peer. And the fifth element of participatory culture is individual expression to community involvement. Therefore, participatory culture shifts the focus of literacy from individual expression to community involvement. Now, there are three major concerns when it comes to participatory culture. These concerns have been talked about by Jenkins et al. In the book with regard to participatory culture. The first concern is participation gap, which is essentially about access, the unequal access to opportunities, experiences, skills and knowledge. The second concern is that of transparency problem, wherein young people face challenges on a day-to-day basis in learning to see clearly the way media shapes the perceptions of the world. The third concern is that of ethics challenge, wherein the traditional forms of professional training versus the socialization aspect of the internet is what we need to prepare young people for, since they are increasingly public as media makers and community participants. Therefore, participatory culture and its framework enables us to eradicate the three gaps. Now, participatory culture has also opportunities widely. First is peer-to-peer learning, where individuals learn from one another. Second is a changed attitude towards intellectual property. Third is the diversification of cultural experience and expression, since we have people coming from varied cultural backgrounds and participatory culture is more towards community involvement. Fourth is the development of skills valued in the modern workplace, especially when it comes to social skills and cultural competencies. And the next and the last opportunity is that of empowered conception of citizenship. As we talked about in the last video lecture about political approach, participatory culture also has a more empowered nuance towards citizenship and making use of effective communication for civic engagement and public engagement. There are four forms of participatory culture. First is affiliations, wherein we talk about memberships, formal as well as informal, in online communities centered around various forms of media such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, message boards, metagaming, game clans or MySpace. The second form of participatory culture is expressions, wherein young people are producing new creative forms such as digital sampling, skinning and modding. Fan video making, fan fiction writing, zines, mashups are all examples of expressions. The third form of participatory culture is collaborative problem solving. Young people nowadays are working together in teams, formal as well as informal, to complete tasks and to develop new knowledge. Through Wikipedia, we see people are collaborating to create content. Then we also see alternative reality gaming being a hyped up thing even after the pandemic. Then spoiling is another example of collaborative problem solving. The fourth form of participatory culture is circulations, wherein young people are shaping the flow of media with podcasting and blogging, of course. Now, the core concept of participatory culture is a concept borrowed from GE in their book in 2004. The concept is that of affinity spaces. Now, affinity spaces are nothing but informal learning cultures which offer powerful opportunities for learning. Now, according to GE, since young people have more time playing with these new media, they also find greater comfort interacting via them, which in a way influences greater fluidity in navigating, their ability to multitask on the platform, and they are also able to build better decisions about the quality of information that they are gathering. Therefore, they are able to collaborate better with people from diverse cultural backgrounds. Now, affinity spaces also enable us to learn why people learn more, participate more actively, engage more deeply with popular culture than they do with the contents of their textbooks. Therefore, affinity spaces is focusing on the impact, or in fact the active side of impact when it comes to popular culture and how young people are engaging with popular culture to learn specifically. Affinity spaces also bridges the differences in age, class, race, gender and educational level. However, it depends on peer-to-peer teaching, with each participant constantly motivated to acquire new knowledge or refine their existing skills. Therefore, affinity spaces is extensively different from formal educational systems. They are more experimental in nature, while formal educational systems are very rigid. Affinity spaces are also innovative since there are varied media forms that one can participate in. There are also provisional structures where a young person can choose a structure which might not all that be rigid or structuralized. They are also able to meet their short-term needs. It is also very localized in nature, and affinity spaces are extremely flexible as compared to formal education systems. Therefore, when we talk about participatory culture frameworks, it is composed of popular culture and education. The amalgamation of the both becomes informal learning culture or affinity spaces. Now, popular culture would encompass fan culture, fandom, OTT shows, music, series, gaming, etc. And education would be academic learning. Therefore, when we combine both of them, informal learning cultures help us understand how young people engage in online media to learn, and it also helps us in understanding the new media literacy skills or 21st century digital skills that one needs to imbibe. Now, when we talk about social skills in new media or 21st century skills, as Jenkins et al. Have talked about in their book on participatory culture, there is a qualitative difference in ways in which we make sense of cultural experience. That is, you and me, we have different kinds of cultural experiences and we make sense of the information we are getting according to that. Therefore, there is also a change in how we understand literacy and the connotations of it. These set of social skills and cultural competencies almost involve social skills developed through collaboration and networking. These skills also build on the foundation of traditional literacy, research skills, technical skills, and critical analysis skills taught in the classroom. The new media literacies should be seen as social skills, as ways of interacting within a larger community, and not simply an individualized skill to be used for personal expression. Therefore, youth need these skills for working within social networks, for pooling knowledge within a collective intelligence, for negotiating across cultural differences that shape the assumptions of different communities, basically to eradicate those assumptions, and for reconciling conflicting bits of information and data to form a coherent picture of what is happening in the world, and this can be done via these particular skills that Jenkins et al. Have talked about. The first new media literacy skill is play, which is the capacity to experiment with one's surroundings as a form of problem solving. Now in play, students or young people try on roles, they experiment with culturally centered processes, they manipulate core resources, and they explore their environment. Therefore, play ranges from fun to engagement and then learning. Educators use play as a skill when they encourage free-form experimentation and open-minded speculation. The second new media literacy skill is performance, which is the ability to adopt alternative identities for the purpose of improvisation and discovery. Now, gameplay is considered a kind of performance because it encourages us to assume fictitious identities to develop a richer understanding. Schools and after-school programs initiate dramatizations which help us teach children to reflect more deeply on their experiences of the stories. One of the key examples of performance is Model United Nation, which helps young users or young people to develop new knowledge and strategies by donning alternative identities. It can also be said in the case of games, wherein virtual games where you're able to adapt a fictitious identity and you're able to understand and improve yourself better in your real life as well. The third new media literacy skill would be that of simulation, which is the ability to interpret and construct dynamic models of real world processes. Now, as we know, there are new ways of representing and manipulating information. Therefore, there are also new forms of simulation which expand our cognitive capacity to deal with larger bodies of information, to experiment with more complex data, and to form hypotheses quickly and test them against different variables. One of the key examples for simulation would be that of contemporary video games, which allows us to play with sophisticated simulations and in the process to develop an intuitive understanding of how we might use simulations to test our assumptions about the way the world works. Some of the key examples of such contemporary video games would be Clash of Clans, Temple Run, Candy Crush for me. Although they simulate us and we're able to interpret and construct the world better, but there's a thin line between accessing those games and addiction. However, we as users are studying about media literacy and we be able to access through them and navigate through them in a much better manner. The fourth skill in the new media literacy skill framework is appropriation, which is the ability to meaningfully sample and remix media content. Now, we as individuals learn by taking culture apart and putting it back together. Culture in this context is mainly art, theatre, music, videos, anything. It is also a process that involves both analysis and commentary, therefore it is very critical in nature. Now, students are learning sampling intelligently from the existing cultural material. For example, we are learning on how to put up information together by searching information for our assignments, for our tests, and for that remixing is required, which is an appreciation of emerging structures and the underlying potential meanings. Examples of such can be drama, theatre, art and music. Now, we as individuals used to go for Shakespeare plays, and it is also very common in India to go for Shakespeare plays, and appropriation is actually a key aspect of those plays, wherein we are able to sample through and remix the content of Shakespeare plays. The fifth new media literacy skill is multitasking, which is the ability to scan one's environment and shift focus as needed to salient details. Now, focusing attention to learn cohesively is extensively important. Multitasking therefore involves a method of monitoring and responding to the sea of information around us. Now, young people are engaging with games or social activities that reward the ability to maintain a mental picture of complex set of relationships and to adjust quickly to shifts in perpetual cues. One of the prime examples of this would be family relationships, which we get in exams at times. And multitasking in the media context would be multitasking across different media platforms, across different formats, and the different kinds of communication that we want to put forward. Sixth new media literacy skill is distributed cognition, which is the ability to interact meaningfully with the tools that expand mental capacities. Now, we as individuals and young people need to learn the different tools and information technologies, and in order to know in which functions of tools and technologies we need to excel at, and in what contexts they can be trusted and used. Therefore, young people need to acquire patterns of thought that regularly cycle through available sources of information as they make sense of developments in the world around them. One example for distributed cognition would be augmented reality, which is a potential tool for distributed intelligence to apply in the learning process. An easy example, if I would want to give in distributed cognition, is learning Google Classroom. Now, you as students might not have been comfortable using Google Classroom before an IGNOU course under Arul sir, but now that you are, you'll be able to see that you're able to interact with Google Classroom in a much more better manner, and you're able to also use the tool to expand your mental capacities. The seventh new media literacy skill is that of collective intelligence, which is the ability to pool knowledge and compare notes with others towards a common goal. Now, in order to operate within knowledge communities, by interacting with popular culture, collective intelligence is extensively important. We often learn through play that we later apply to more serious tasks. For example, young Pokemon fans can imbibe knowledge and inculcate more knowledge when we go to playgrounds to find Pokemon, and when they talk to other people where to find a particular Pokemon in a playground. Therefore, they collect intelligence in a more nuanced manner. Therefore, students pool observations and work through interpretations with others studying the same problem from scattered locations. Such knowledge communities can confront problems of greater scale and complexity. The eighth new media literacy skill is that of judgment, which is the ability to evaluate the reliability and credibility of different information sources. That is, we need to understand how to distinguish fact from fiction, argument from documentation, real from fake, and marketing from enlightenment. That is, judgment is a key aspect when it comes to talking about media and information literacy, because we need to evaluate the kind of information we are getting, and we need to find if it is valid enough and reliable, and we do that by searching through different sources of information. Even when media content has been determined credible, it is vital for us as individuals to identify and analyze the perspective of the producer, as in to understand who is presenting what, to whom and why. And cultural competencies become a major role to understand the perspective of the producer as well. The ninth new media literacy skill is that of transmedia navigation, which is the ability to follow the flow of stories and information across multiple modalities. Now, transmedia stories at the most basic level are stories told across multiple media. Modern literacy therefore requires the ability to express ideas across a broad range of different systems of representation and signification, including words, spoken or written, images which are still are moving, music, 3D models, etc. There are different possible modes of expression, and we need to find the most effective in reaching the audience and communicating our message across effectively. We also need to identify the best techniques in conveying information through a particular channel. The 10th new media literacy skill is that of networking, which is the ability to search for, synthesize and disseminate information. Now, networking is not just about identifying potential sources, it also involves a process of synthesis wherein you gather information and you're able to combine them together in a more nuanced manner, during which multiple resources are combined to produce new knowledge. Social networking sites are being used extensively by young users to share their interests or to encourage themselves to publish work produced to a broader public. Now, blogging can be one of those examples wherein you put up your blog to put your opinion forward or whatever you want to say, and you get comments on that. It is a kind of networking. There are also responsive blogging, wherein when you put up a blog, a person responds to them and critically analyzes it. So it is also kind of networking. The 11th new media literacy skill is that of negotiation, which is the ability to travel across diverse communities, discerning and respecting multiple perspectives, and grasping and following alternative norms. Now, negotiation is extremely important for people belonging to different cultural backgrounds, because unless we negotiate and we understand another person's cultural perspective, it is difficult or perhaps impossible to participate them in an effective manner. The fluid communication brings together groups who otherwise might have lived segregated lives. One of the key examples is what we are doing right now. For this particular course, you and I might not have discussed about this aspect, but we are here via an online media, and by perception, my ideas would be reflected in my cultural background, and you would be able to identify them if you have a similar background, and you might not be able to understand them if you have a different cultural background, but you might negotiate and might be able to traverse through in a much more nuanced manner if you understand my cultural perspective. Therefore, culture flows smoothly from one community to another via communication channels, and you negotiate through them at each and every step. There are also meaning of shared artifacts and experiences that we travel across and we look through while negotiating. We might have one word which might differently for you and for me, while in the case of negotiation, we are able to communicate it in a more effective manner. There are also skills in understanding multiple perspectives, respecting them and embracing them, because there are diversity of views, and to understand a variety of social norms, it is essential to negotiate between conflicting opinions and to navigate them in a more nuanced and a more effective manner. Therefore, negotiation brings together groups from diverse backgrounds and provides them with resources and processes that ensure careful listening and more in-depth communication. One of the key examples for negotiation would be group discussions, wherein we indulge in group discussions and talk about certain issues, and via that we are able to understand each and every person's perception about a certain issue, and with that you can think about the cultural background that they are coming from. Therefore, participatory culture as a concept combines traditional literacy skills, that is how to source information, evaluate the credibility of information, synthesize and make sense of that information apart from making a decision and initiating an action, and new media literacy, which is social skills or methods of interaction with larger communities. Therefore, in a nutshell, participatory culture enables more active participation, and it also enables an empowered voice by imbibing these certain social skills and cultural competencies. And you as young users or young people, if imbibed through these social skills and cultural competencies, you will be able to navigate online spaces in a much better manner, and you will be able to participate in these platforms in a much better manner. Thank you.